Welcome to the Ideal Investor Show. This is the podcast where we help you challenge your mindset and discover where you are. Tired of stories about other people's success? We can help you change your life, determine your time freedom point, and join us on the journey to financial success. Let's go. All right, welcome to the Ideal Investor Show, where we bring you awesome guests and awesome episodes that have to do with investing and real estate and building a portfolio and getting to financial freedom. And today we have another one of these awesome guests, and we almost forgot to hit the record button because Thomas and we were chatting along and so much aligned that we forgot, hey, we're actually here to do a podcast. So Thomas Blottenberger, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. And yes, that is, sorry about that. That is what happened.
No, I love to talk, right? Anybody, if they have to say, there's this German little saying is, when this guy dies, you have to kill him twice, once for him and once for his mouth.
That's an amazing statement.
So, I can joke about it. Anyway, Thomas, so glad that you're here and that you can join us and tell our audience a little bit what you do. But before we get there, tell us a little bit, how did Thomas do and get to where you are today?
Man, okay. Sorry, I was still on that comment. This is, again, we were talking about how aligned we were, right? So I'm going to share the story real quick. My mom's side goes back 6 generations, Portuguese, but my dad is pretty much 100% German. That's where the name comes from and where my face comes from, right? But I used to joke when people would ask me, what's it like in Hawaii? You always get origin story questions, right? So they'd say, what's it like to be Portuguese and German? And I'd say, well, I talk a lot and I'm very assertive, right? That's that mixture there for you. So I love what you said about talking too much or so much. The story begins in Hawaii. My grandfather was my best friend. He went for surgery that didn't go well and ended up in a coma and passed away. And I got to watch what happens when people don't have the financial world in order. At least that's what I thought it was, right? I thought it was that the financial world wasn't in order, and that's why everybody was kind of losing it and their family fragmented. And I thought, well, this might be a really good place to help people. So while I was still in college, I passed the certified financial planner designation, and I interviewed about 23 different companies: Morgan Stanley, Merrill Lynch, Ameriprise, John Hancock, Edward Jones. I pretty much checked it out. And it was kind of like if you walk into a Safeway or you walk into a Publix, it's kind of like the names are different. The supermarkets, the names are different, but the inside's all the same. You walk in
Wendy's and
yeah, and it's still got the same feel. Yeah. And that's kind of how it was. Pick your flavor, really. For the most part, the traditional financial world is pick your flavor. Everybody's doing the same thing. The different flavor of gambling with your money. Thank you for paying us for the privilege. And then picked one that I thought was good, that did comprehensive financial planning. About 7, almost 8 years into that, I discovered what we were giving people as investment options didn't really work. Every time I'd recommend something, it would be based on like the fact that I had a 5-star track record and that I had really good ratings. And the moment I recommended it, it started to do terrible. You can never really figure that out. That was always like, what the heck is going on? This is what I was told to do. At the same time, I started to realize that people make not logical, and I don't mean this like negatively, I just mean it as a statement of fact of humans, right? I used to think people made money decisions logically. And then I realized that's not the case, right? Most people make all decisions emotionally and out of biases and out of what they saw happen in the past. And while the brain is really good for doing that and it's designed to do that, it doesn't really work well when you need to think from a place of abundance. Abundance is not a natural human state. Survival is. So you had these two things happening at the same time about 8 years into the business of me realizing the strategies I was offering people weren't really working. They weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing. And then I realized that even when things did work, it tended to be worse. Like people started to kind of stress out more when I gave them more things that actually worked because we weren't dealing with the underlying mindset. And then all kind of came to a head where I learned that there was actually, when it comes to passive stock market investing, that there's actually a science to doing that. And you can build and design a portfolio that doesn't require that you hire someone to gamble with your money or gamble with it on your own. And I brought that back to my old firm and I said, we should teach this. This is amazing. And they went, if people learn about this, they won't buy our product. And I was like, oh man, we're the bad guys. Cool. Thanks for letting me know. And that was when I started Paradigm Shift Financial. I left all my income, all my revenue, all my insurance contracts, and started the company with nothing. That was a fun time. And over the last, I've been in the industry for 15 years now. So over the last 7 years, it's really been about designing conversations more intentionally around behavior and purpose and mindset, continuing to refine and how I teach and educate on the science of designing an investment portfolio. Okay. So there's in a nutshell my origin.
Yeah, that's very cool. Now, one thing, and I don't know if it's allowed because I'm not a certified financial planner, but you mentioned emotional decision making, even when it comes to money. How many of the people that you served in your first 8 years thought, okay, Thomas is leaving. We believe in Thomas. We trust Thomas. We know that Thomas is trying his best for our well-being. We want to continue to work with Thomas.
That's a really good question. Thanks for opening me up like that, Axel. No, that was, I'll tell you, that was everybody will have a point. If you haven't had one yet, just know it's coming, where you will have a crisis of faith. You'll have a moment where you discover something about what you're doing, about what you believe, about what you think, and you discover that it's not true, or you discover that, there's a more powerful way. And you're going to be faced with a choice. And my choice was to pretend I didn't learn what I had learned about how to actually manage money and keep my, nice 6-figure renewal income plus commission income and not make any waves, or make waves, do what I knew in my heart was the right thing to do, and accept whatever the, let's call it, consequences of that would be. So I chose that one. And that was a very, very difficult one to choose. And a lot of people won't choose that, right? Again, that kind of goes back to what you're saying about victim mindset. It's not so, in this instance, it's not so much victim, it's survival. That was a survival question. Am I going to survive leaving all this income and starting something I don't know is actually going to work? I know it works conceptually, but to actually teach people it is something different. To the actual root of your question, I went to every single client and I just said it straight. Hey, I'm leaving the company because I've learned that what I've got you in and what you're doing is not actually what's best for you. And I'm sorry. At the time, I thought it's what was best. And now with what I've learned, it actually isn't. And I'd like to share with you what I've learned and why I'm moving. And ultimately, you can decide what you want to do. And I had people that appreciated that and came with me. And I had people that cussed me out. You're the one who's supposed to know all this stuff. What the hell, blah, 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 blah. And I also understood that. It's hard not to take that stuff personally, but at the same token, it wasn't personal. They trusted me. They got hurt, or they felt like betrayed. I got it.
The term that came to mind when you were describing it to me, you consciously knew what you did and you learned consciously that there's a better way. Mm-hmm. And then consciously made the decision, okay, I can't, in good conscience, I think that's where the term partially comes from, keep doing what I know is wrong. Now, with that being said, if you accept that as kind of like a bridge to say, what is that scientific method, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, you already know this. We talked about it, and I think just from your expertise, there's multiple types of investing. I consider real estate, it's more semantics than anything, but if we're getting technical, I consider real estate to be more so business. If I'm owning real estate, I'm actually an owner in a business entity. Even if I have property managers and things of that nature, well, now I'm the CEO of that business, right? Right. End of the day, if things go haywire, I'm responsible for that. Whereas with investing, I'm really looking at purely passive, where Elon Musk sends a tweet and I don't need to call him up and be like, dude, why'd you do that? Like, you're messing with the stock price, right? Like, I don't have any control of that.
Also not fire him. I can fire my property.
Exactly. So again, perfect. That's another example that proves the point of the distinction between investing passively, truly passively, and then actually having some ownership. What we're really looking at is, are markets efficient? Do markets as a whole, particularly stock markets, are they efficient and effective at pricing goods and services? Companies included in those goods and services, right? The conglomerate of people buying and selling.
Yeah.
And I'm of the position, and I think the scientific evidence validates that, markets are efficient. They react very powerfully, very quickly to new information. The existing information is already available, is already in the price. And so it's only unknown and random information that moves it into the future. It's a hypothesis by a guy named Eugene Fama called efficient market hypothesis. Now, technically, this is really what all capitalists believe. Because if you didn't believe this, if you didn't believe markets were efficient and they were inefficient, then that would suggest that there was a better pricing model out there. And thus far, we don't have any evidence that anything is better at pricing goods and services than a capitalistic market where people buy and sell and have supply and demand. From that standpoint, it becomes, well, if markets are efficient and it's already in the price, is there any way to actually know in advance what company I should buy or what tech sector I should buy or any of that kind of stuff? And again, all the evidence says that's random and unpredictable. So usually if you look at how people are making buying decisions, it's almost entirely based on a story. No actual evidence. Why are you buying Tesla? And someone says, well, there's one of two ways, right? I'm buying Tesla because Elon Musk is a visionary and he's a genius and he's going to take us to Mars and blah, blah, blah. That's all a story in the future that already is factored into the price today because we already all know that, right? Then the flip side is the technical analysis. Oh, well, the PE ratios and the alpha and the beta and the blah, blah, blah. Great, but that's past data. So it's also already in the price. Anything that's particularly when it comes to the stock market and stock portfolios, anything that's a prediction of the future is inherently a gamble right off the bat. The question then becomes, is there a way to invest in the stock market passively that doesn't require me to predict the future? And this is what Eugene Fama won the Nobel Prize for, was on one hand, he hypothesized that markets are efficient. They're an amazing pricing system, and that it already incorporates all the data. On the flip side, he goes, well, how would you test that? Well, we test that by looking at risk return premiums. You take a whole basket of stocks, not just one or two. You take a whole basket of stocks and you compare that to not being in the stock market, like fixed income, bond portfolios, things like that. And because stocks have a higher risk tolerance or a higher risk metric, it's no surprise, based on an efficient market, that they produce higher returns over a long period of time, significantly higher, right? You take a basket of small company stocks versus large company stocks. Again, same trend. Over a long period of time, due to them being riskier, small companies outperform large. And then finally, there's a third factor. This is called the three-factor model, by the way. Third factor is a category called value versus growth. They look at value over a long period of time, and value outperforms growth. Now, what's interesting is when we look at most people's portfolios, they don't have value and they don't have small. They have all large growth. And that's because of the fact that we make emotional decisions and we make decisions based on biases, herding bias, familiarity bias, recency bias, hindsight bias.
I agree with that. Well, for one, when I'm listening to the description, I really would question a little bit this market efficiency. I totally see this applicable for a commodities market. In my observation, and I have very little expertise in comparison to what you bring to the table, but to me, the traditional, like anything like Dow, S&P 500, NASDAQ or stuff, I'm not so sure that I would really attach the label efficient to it. And not because it couldn't be, but I believe the analyst community and the financial services community has polluted the information so much, and in some cases, almost to a criminal level, in the attempt to simplify it, reduce it to an extent that what they're actually using to make any kind of statement, I don't even want to call it prediction, just statement, is inherently false. Like when everything is only based on EPS and the next 90 days, and I know I'm overdoing it a little bit, then it's like basically, okay, which number on the roulette table do you want me to put it on, right? It's not even just black and red. It's basically any number, and let's see what the likelihood is that it's a 1 in 50 correct. that's my opinion about it. Not to say I have stocks, but when it comes to what you just said, there's a huge difference, obviously, to believe in what a company is doing and then looking maybe with advice from somebody like you, Thomas, to say how likely is it, how probable is it that they can do what they say they want to do in a competitive environment, and then place your bet on that probability versus this. And for the audience, I'm using some French here just so you'll be pre-warned. This ridiculous bullshit that comes out every 90 days on what is our expectation. And then we see headlines like, I mean, I'm invested in Palantir. So Palantir did amazing. They made 680 million instead of 650 million in 90 days. And if in 90 days from now, they make 590 instead of 620, Palantir screwed up. They should fire the CEO. They don't know how to sell software anymore. This is literally what happens times about 7,500 on a daily basis all across the industry. And that's what I think is making it so hard for the average person when they don't have somebody like you, Thomas, and maybe you can describe a little bit how you actually serve your clients next. To do anything, because what I'm ultimately facing in my real estate focused investing support and mentoring is that people come to me to say, I did this, I drank the Kool-Aid and I got screwed left and right, not necessarily only from where you used to work, but just in general.
Yep.
And the one thing I learned is this is basically like gambling, and I want something that's predictable. And I think when you speak of a scientific approach, there's at least an increased predictability. So can you describe a little bit more in practical terms if somebody were to say, okay, I came out of the casino, but I still believe in the fundamental benefit of owning parts of a company. How does that work if I work with Thomas?
Yeah, well, first off, thank you for what you shared, and let's call it, you undercut your opinion and said, I don't know as much as you do. I don't think that that's true.
No.
And I really, I appreciate the perspective. Now, there is something important to address in what you said, which is it's so good, so on track, because this is exactly where I was. I watched my dad for 20 years do day trading every single day. And he was also a realtor and owned a very successful business in Hawaii. And it's why when I actually started with a insurance heavy company, because I watched my dad, who knows so much and is so intelligent, pour over charts and data and graphs for hours a day and still lose lots of money. And what I thought was, well, stock markets just are the Wild West. They don't work. Why would you play them? So I went with an insurance heavy company because, hell, at least you got a contract, right? If you understand contract law and you understand what the contract says, you're at least better off than, the Wild West of the stock market. And that's what I thought. And what you said, what was really powerful, is that is exactly what the commentators and the prognosticators, we call them on TV, and the gurus, they want you to think that it is unpredictable, that it's the Wild West, and they want to draw your eyeball. So of course they're not going to make it simple, right? Of course, if you're trying to fill 24-hour news cycles, you're not going to just repeat the same story for 24 hours. Hey, you know what? Markets are efficient. We don't need to worry. Just stick in it for the long term. Make sure you're diversified. Have holdings that are scientifically designed. No, they're not going to say that, right? One of my favorite, it's a Fox News clip. If you don't like Fox News, whatever, it's irrelevant. The point is, it's a Fox Business clip of one of my mentors, Mark Matson, on Neil Cavuto. And he tells Neil that this isn't rocket science brain surgeon level stuff. And Neil shushes him. He goes, shh, it's my job to make people believe that it is. There's two aspects of this. First off, you have to what's being collapsed are two things. Number one, collapsing the fact that there is a demand for eyeballs and that we are drawn to negative news and that there's a need to fill 24-hour news cycles so that they can sell, the products that are on the commercials, right? Disengaging that from the actual market itself. So if you can disengage that piece right off the bat and get that those people are full, as you said, bullshit, right? And just set that to the side and just ignore those people. Now the question is, is there a way to actually invest money that I'm not actively using for something and still produce consistent, reliable results? And the answer is yes, because when you strip that out and you stop trying to look at individual companies, I have no idea what the next NVIDIA is going to be. I have no idea what the next Netflix is going to be, but I can bet you that it's not going to come from a marketplace of of multiple billion-dollar market capitalization companies, large companies.
Right.
It's going to come from a basket of small companies. Now, again, I don't know what ones there are. So the objective in a scientific investing strategy is you determine where the risk preferences are. Where do returns come from most often? At higher volumes. We know that small company marketplaces outperform large company marketplaces most of the time over any 20-year period. It's like 80-something% of the time. Value company marketplaces outperform growth company marketplaces based on historical data. I have no idea what's going to happen going forward because I don't predict the future. But value companies are somewhere in the 94th percentile. If I'm going to have to make a guess, I'm going to guess that I'm going to put a higher tilt of my portfolio into small companies and value companies than I'm going to put them into large and growth, because the scientific research and data shows that small and value over long periods of time give us the best results. That's kind of the science piece of this, right? Well, not kind of, it is. You stop gambling on individual companies. I mean, you do what you want, but acknowledge it's a gamble. If you want to stop gambling, you remove individual companies, you stop trying to predict the future on what company is going to do what, and you own the whole marketplace of those companies, because capitalism determines the victor. And if you own as many of them as possible, you participate in that. So our portfolios have I think the aggressive portfolio we've got has 25,000 unique holdings over 80 countries. And it's tilted towards small and value. And it incorporates efficient market hypothesis, three-factor model, and then, of course, modern portfolio theory to create the possibility for the best returns for any risk you're willing to take.
I would assume that you still have a certain averaging effect, right? Because out of those 80,000 companies, there are some that will be home runs and some that will do reasonably well, and some will falter within 5 years or even less. And so you have some averaging effect, I would assume. Now, one thing, my philosophy is I think everybody should have some stocks. But associated with it, and I'm really curious what you would say about this, one of the things that Warren Buffett said is, I only invest in things that I understand. If I take that one step further and say, okay, I want to understand it, but I also want to be fascinated by the vision. If you had the opportunity to go back 10, 20, 30, 40 years and were to select stocks to pick, knowing what you know right now, the answer is almost always, I wish I could have bought Apple when it was small. I wish I would have bought Amazon when it was like $5 a share. That were small, that were growth companies that ultimately became big, and I would say at least behaved like value companies. The core thing that I believe makes a huge difference, and I want to ask you about that because it's not really my core area, is the importance of being convinced that the vision that the company has, besides being interesting, has a chance of becoming reality.
Yeah. Okay. What I want you to hear, and this is how human it is, the fundamental desire to still bring something into a one-off scenario. And there's nothing wrong with this, right? But it's just a way to look, is I'm talking about, don't try to pick individual companies. I don't know what's going to be the next home run, but I do know that the whole marketplace of small companies outperforms the whole marketplace of large companies. I got no clue which one it's going to be. The vision doesn't matter. And do you know why the vision doesn't matter? Because the people that buy and the people that sell are ultimately going to be the ones that determine the value of the company. You can have the best vision in the world, and if more people decide to sell than people that buy into the vision, you're going to have one of those moments of what happened. I thought they had something really good going on. I can't believe they went out of business. It's because you're not the only person participating in the buying and the selling of the company. Part of the reason why this is so crazy is because you think, not you as you, Axel, but you as an individual listener, right? Think that you're onto something. Oh, I've got this company figured out. This is a great company. Well, that still requires that every other person participatory in the market has the same thought process you do. And who knows, maybe they might like another competitor better, or something might come out about the CEO and the CEO did some embezzling, or hell, like Enron. There's great, amazing books, amazing value, amazing investment. Oh, it was all a lie. Oops, right? So that's why the way you create, what I want you to hear in this, listeners, and I guess maybe you too, Axel, is the way that you create certainty or more certainty in passive stock market investing is you stop trying to predict which company is going to win and you participate in the entirety of the market, because capitalism tends to raise all ships, right? Capitalism, innovation, creativity, entrepreneurship. Every country that embraces that proven has higher values or higher quality of life, better, economic outlooks, better economic experience, more people elevated out of poverty, right? And because what you said, the creator mindset, I have it that I don't know who's going to win, but I know that the system works. And so I don't need, when it comes to passive stock market investing, like the S&P, right, in the last 100 years has averaged 10%. The small cap or large value has averaged 12%. Small cap value has averaged 15% per year. Per year. I don't need to beat that in the stock market. If I'm passively investing, just give me that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm totally with you on that. I mean, in a way, and it wasn't planned, just so the audience doesn't think I'm trying to trick them or something like that. You made the perfect argument for why I'm saying in my area of expertise, we want to be in residential real estate and we want to have a diversified portfolio. We're not really predicting which one of the 10, 15 or 20 properties or however many it takes for you to achieve your goals is going to be the best performer. The one thing we know is if we only have a one single 100 unit apartment complex, and to stay with our starting conversation, it gets flooded or it burns down or it becomes part of the biggest crime area in the city or stuff, you're probably screwed. But if you have a diversified portfolio of assets, in this case, properties, then yes, not every single one is maybe performing exactly as you expected, but there will be home runs and there will be some that are maybe underperforming. And what's also true is, as an asset, it keeps increasing, at least at inflation over time. And if you add all the other benefits that the government is throwing at us, at least so far for the last 100 years, then it can be competitive to the numbers you mentioned in the 10, 12, 15% and more. I think we are very aligned like we started this out. So I want to thank you for that. Now, if people say, wow, I want to have a piece of that, I no longer want to sweat when, like yesterday, the Nikkei goes down 12% and
right.
Stuff like that. So how can people get in touch with you?
One thing to say, just from what you finished us off with there, that I thought was really powerful, is a lot of times people have the mindset, and you already demonstrated that it doesn't have to be this way. A lot of times people have the mindset of either or. Yeah. Right? Like, well, either I'm a stock guy and I got my money in the stock market, or I'm a real estate guy and I got all my money in real estate. And the most powerful thing I can see is a combination. Well, if you want to run real estate as a business, you want to participate in it, you like the activity of it, which a lot of people do. And the reason why I keep saying business, Axel, and I think you might know this too, is because I deal with a lot of people that don't realize how much, let's call it, work is involved in doing this properly, especially if you're going to be at the forefront of it, right? They're like, oh, I'm just going to buy a property and then I'm going to make money. It's like, there's sometimes more to it than that, a little bit, right? So that's why I keep putting it in the perspective of business, and it's still lucrative as a business, phenomenal business. But it's really, you demonstrated this already yourself by saying that you own some stocks. It's possible to have an experience of both, but if you're going to do both, you got to make sure you're doing something powerful with both. It'd be crazy if you're gambling with real estate and you're gambling with the stock market at the same time. Give yourself a break, like.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, yeah, I don't know that there is a way to gamble with gold coins, which we also hold, So absolutely, you're right. I mean, my point was, you want to have a diversified portfolio, and it's totally fine to have a focus area. Like in our case, my focus area would be real estate, and stocks would be supplemental. And in your case, it might be the other way around.
Yeah.
But it gives more of a holistic picture. And there's also something to be said.
Yep.
One thing that you can do in stocks, and my listeners know this, is I can get these properties in these counties for 20% of my own money. Simple example, you say, okay, well, this property cost me 200,000, but I really only put 40,000. So 75% in 4 years makes it 350,000, right? So my $50,000 are now $250,000. And has that happened before? Maybe. I was definitely not alive. Will it happen anytime soon again? Probably not, right? And the same thing would be true for other places. When people timed it perfectly, you could go from like $35 in 1971 to insane numbers, like 800 something dollars in gold ounce value.
Yep.
Bitcoin, if you timed it right, you could have gone from like $10 or $20 to $70,000 in like less than 5 years. And so forth. So there are these short periods, but they're completely unpredictable. That's why I'm so much speaking to you. You should be involved in things to some degree and just pick whichever area you want to have your main focus on. And then as far as the passivity goes, I mean, that is the big thing that we do different than most others. We have developed a model, and our audience knows this, where it is about equally passive, but because we're basically building a little company and we're hiring everything out. China, but to like the turnkey provider, to the property manager, to the insurance provider, to the lender, to the landscaper, to everybody. And then we can do individual property 30 minutes a month, right? But only when you initially, and that's what I basically do. I help people to have access to this network, and they just hire all these people. And it's the same thing like I mentioned earlier with the average effect when you have 80,000 stocks in a portfolio.
Yep.
Is there a way to make it even more efficient than what we do? Yes. But you drastically increase risk, and you drastically increase activity that you basically paying time for that extra money. And so if you say, I want the best result for the least effort, then you do it passively, right? You and I do that.
Yeah, again, that's where I think we're super aligned. And then one last thing to say there, and then I'll tell my information contact, right, is most people have diversification as, and I think you hit the nail on the head. Most people have diversification as, I just put a bunch of stuff in something. And that's actually not the point of diversification, right? The point of diversification is that don't have all your eggs in one basket. The actual science is more like don't have shitty eggs. And so it becomes really important to analyze the eggs that you're putting into the basket. And in some instances, fewer high quality eggs is better than a bunch of really crappy eggs, right?
Well, my farm is actually even more diverse. I would say let's have some poultry and some pigs and some beef and some sheep, right?
It's so good.
You have 80,000 eggs and you still can have some.
Well, hold on. Important just for your listeners. 25,000 is the unique holdings that we have. Over 80.
Sorry.
No. Just so that if my compliance team hears this conversation, I'm not in trouble for.
No, absolutely. All right. So tell us, how do we get to the man with 25,000 eggs?
LinkedIn is probably easiest. I'm committed to starting to use it and be more intentional with it. So it's just my name, right? Thomas Blottenberger, and then my website is paradigmshift.a as in alpha, D as in delta, X as in X-ray, leader.com.
All right, cool. So we put all of those things obviously in the show notes, and then you can pick which path you prefer.
Cool. Thanks, Axel. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. That's the least we can do. Okay, so last two questions, unrelated.
All right.
If you could meet anybody, who would it be and why?
Well, I'm sure this is a common answer, but it really, I'm just going to embrace it and own it. I was trying to think of someone other than this. The first one that comes to mind is Jesus, right? I'd actually like to meet the guy, from a standpoint of the miracles that he did and what he did on the earth. It's like, if the people that were around him still doubted sometimes, it'd be interesting to actually meet him and see what it was like and be like, okay, I get it, right?
Right. A lot of people have chosen that choice.
I had another one. I actually had it. Cannot remember his name. Someone can Google it, I'm sure. But it's a 3-named Roman guy. They had a war going on. He got appointed to lead everything and won the war. Like, just basically took over as a dictator for a period of time, won the war, and then gave it up and went back to farming.
Yeah, that's pretty. Just for people listening to us in the US, that's how it used to be after the US got rid of the British for Congress. That's why there were no need for term limits, because you did it for like 2, 3, 4 years, and then you had to go back to the farm. You couldn't stay away any longer than that, and it solved itself. Right? Nowadays, we have people that have 56 years and then they become president. Right?
One thing models didn't predict, I think, was that it could become a career, or that it would be a career to become a politician.
Yeah, and that you actually didn't need to know shit about anything. You could just have the position and stay there forever, you know. So anyways, thank you so much for being on the show. I hope we should do this again at some point. And for the audience, you know, take a look at the links that Thomas provided and get in touch and become part of this amazing opportunity of scientific investing.
Sweet. Yeah, thanks for having me. Maybe next time I'm on, we can talk more about mindset, because that's a whole another world, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, there's no reason we couldn't have more than one show.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dominic.